Have you ever heard of a Rolex? If you're living under a rock, then chances are you haven't. But for anyone who knows about luxury watches, Rolex is the first name that pops into their head. In fact, it's one of the best-selling luxury watch brands in the world. People are always trying to get their hands on these watches, but they're so popular that it often results in long waiting lists and high resale prices. When you consider how expensive these timepieces are, it's easy to understand why people want to hold on to them forever. The brand was founded in 1905 by Hans Wilsdorf and Alfred Davis. At first, they were just two guys trying to make a buck by selling pocket watches. But after some time, they decided to start making wristwatches instead. The problem was that even though they were skilled watchmakers, they didn't have the money to buy machinery. So instead, they bought pre-existing watches from other manufacturers and assembled them in their workshop. Then they attached their own dials and cases to the watches and sold them to local jewelers. Even though this wasn't ideal, their hard work paid off and they quickly became known for the quality of their watches. In 1910, they created the first waterproof wristwatch, which gave them an edge over their competitors. This allowed them to start producing their own movements in-house, which elevated their brand to new heights. As their business grew, they needed to find a new name for their company. They chose the name Rolex because they thought it sounded unique and memorable. Their new logo was an iconic five-pointed star with a crown at its center, which symbolized the watch's waterproofness. The company continued to grow throughout the 1920s, thanks to the introduction of new models like the Rolex Prince, the first wristwatch to feature a perpetual rotor. By 1931, they had become the largest watch manufacturer in Switzerland. But sadly, the Great Depression hit and people stopped buying luxury items. This forced Rolex to scale back their production and focus on more affordable models. But they were determined to come back bigger than ever before. During World War II, they got the chance when the British military contacted them and asked if they could make some watches for them. Rolex delivered and produced over 600,000 watches for the war effort. After the war ended, veterans started returning home with Rolex watches in hand, which helped boost the brand's popularity. It wasn't long before everyone wanted a Rolex, but this led to another problem. Now that everyone wanted their watches, customers had to wait years to get their hands on one. And when they finally did, they still had to pay exorbitant prices. Rolex knew that they were sitting on a gold mine, but they also felt guilty about taking advantage of their loyal customers. So they tried to speed up production by investing in new technology. Unfortunately, this didn't really help because the demand for their watches was simply too high. By the 1970s, the situation had become so dire that people were reselling Rolex watches for 3 times their original price. And although this may sound like good news for the company, it actually caused problems for them in the long run. You see, when someone buys a luxury item, they expect it to hold its value or even appreciate over time. But if the item starts losing value, that means something went wrong. Rolex was losing millions of dollars every year because people were reselling their watches for less than they paid. They knew that something had to be done, but they weren't sure what. That's when Hans's son, René, took over the company and tried to fix the issue. He cut down on the number of watches they were producing each year and raised their prices to match the resale value. This fixed the problem, but it also made Rolex watches even less accessible. But there was still hope because René had a plan to make more watches available to the public. He came up with a system that would allow customers to put down a deposit and then pick up their watch whenever it was ready. It was brilliant because it guaranteed that Rolex would make money on every sale, and it gave customers the peace of mind that they wouldn't be ripped off. This new policy allowed Rolex to increase production without worrying about the resale value of their watches. And this led to a new era of growth for the company. Throughout the late 20th century, Rolex released many new models, including the Rolex Submariner, the Daytona, and the Explorer. Each model was designed to appeal to a different type of customer. For example, the Submariner was marketed towards scuba divers while the Explorer was designed for adventurers. But no matter which model you prefer, all Rolex watches have one thing in common. They're incredibly durable and can withstand almost any condition. This is because Rolex uses only the highest quality materials in their watches. For example, they use 904L steel for most of their watch cases and bracelets. This is a special type of stainless steel that is more resistant to corrosion than other types of steel. This is important because a watch is only as good as its case and bracelet. If either of them breaks, then the watch is basically useless. But even if you take good care of your Rolex, it will still need to be serviced from time to time. This is because the tiny moving parts inside the watch can wear down over time, and this can cause the watch to lose accuracy. Fortunately, Rolex makes it easy to service your watch by offering free lifetime service. All you have to do is bring your watch to the nearest Rolex service center, and they lines take care of everything for you. But if you don't feel like waiting, you can always try fixing it yourself. In fact, there's a whole community of Rolex enthusiasts online who share tips and tricks for repairing these watches. Of course, it's not quite the same as getting it done professionally, but it can save you a lot of money. Now let's take a look at some of the most valuable Rolex watches ever sold. The first one is the Paul Newman Daytona. This watch is worth an incredible $17.8 million, which makes it the most expensive Rolex ever sold. What makes this watch so valuable is the fact that Paul Newman wore it in several movies. This led to a surge in popularity for the Daytona model, and collectors started paying top dollar for it. Another valuable Rolex is the John Player Special. This watch is worth $10.6 million, and it's much rarer than the Paul Newman Daytona. Only 2 of these watches were ever made, and one of them was given to Formula One driver John Player. The other one was never even opened until recently when it was found in the Rolex vault. And finally, we have the Rolex 1908 pocket watch, which is worth $6.2 million. This watch is so rare that it's technically priceless. It was actually the very first watch that Hans Wilsdorf sold, and it's in perfect condition. No one should ever sell this watch because it's literally a piece of history. All things considered, it's safe to say that Rolex is one of the most successful companies in the world. They've built an incredible brand that people all around the world love. And it doesn't seem like anything will change anytime soon. In fact, the company has been able to stay afloat during recessions and economic uncertainty, which is a testament to the strength of their brand. Even though Rolex is a highly successful company, they still face plenty of competition. One of their biggest rivals is Omega, which is also a Swiss watchmaker. But Omega isn't the only company that Rolex has to worry about. They also have to deal with counterfeiters who try to make fake Rolex watches. In fact, there's an entire industry dedicated to making fake Rolex watches. These counterfeiters use cheap materials and labor to produce fake watches that look almost identical to the real ones. But it's important to remember that these watches are not the same quality as authentic Rolex watches. Not only are they cheaply made, but they also don't keep accurate time. On top of that, buying a counterfeit product is illegal. So it's not worth risking it. Another threat to Rolex is the rise of smartwatches. These devices have many features that traditional watches don't have, such as fitness tracking and smartphone integration. Some people are starting to ditch their traditional watches for smartwatches, which could be bad news for Rolex, but it's also worth noting that smartwatches aren't going away anytime soon. In fact, they're growing in popularity, so Rolex will have to find a way to compete with them if they want to stay relevant. But one thing's for sure, Rolex is a resilient company that has overcome many challenges in the past. It's likely that they'll continue to thrive for many years to come. And that's why we think Rolex is a classic brand that will never die. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe for more content.